Thank you. Thank you for your report, Kevin. This recommendation highlights.
Councillor Taylor, could you just hold fire a moment? There's a problem with the live stream apparently that they're trying to correct.
Chair, I just wonder if it's worth just adjourning for 5 minutes.
Chairman, we are back up again now. We are live, so we can carry on.
Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you. This recommendation highlights the really serious issue of the no surprise protocol. If it were not for the press speculating now on what buildings are going to be sold off, members not involved with this committee would be none the wiser. Apparently, there are now going to be briefings via the community network being put together as we speak. Could someone please tell me what the sequencing plan is and who is going to be signing off on the governance process? The point that Councillor Frost made in relation to the sequencing scoring is also something that I would be interested in having some more insight on. I also think that Cornwall Council have spectacularly revealed their financial negotiation hand by letting would-be developers know that there is a backlog reduction in maintenance of 35 million. In view of page 87 and the timeline, which does not start until March 2021, this is a very premature recommendation. And due to the impact on all members of this council, we must have a full members briefing. We simply do not know enough to support the recommendations and should just note.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Taylor. In your first comment, I have to say that I was equally, I didn't realise, and I must admit, I hadn't been briefed on that the impact of putting this paper without doing it in the right way would lead to it coming out in the public domain, but it has, and that I can only apologise for. If I'd known that it was going to go in that direction, perhaps we might have rethought some of that one. So from a no surprise protocol, that absolutely was something that I feel we slightly, and I take that on board, that we failed in that process. In terms of the briefing sequencing, there is a plan to do an all members briefing at the moment. I think we've got Jonathan French on the call from our change team, who's been working up the whole detail around the briefing sequencing through all members to the community networks, etc. And the governance process, I already pulled a slide up. I think I talked about the governance process in terms of we've got a piece of members engagement that we're currently looking to do with our local communities in tranche 1 that will lead us into February, when we will have been in a position to bring that back initially to our Estates Transformation Board, and then through Scrutiny and through the other investment boards, bringing it towards an approval in July for tranche 1. So there is quite a planned sequencing around the governance programme. Jonathan, do you want to comment on where we are with the members engagement, or the members engagement sequencing on tranche 1, if you're there? I thought he was there. Perhaps he's not. My apologies. Well, we have got quite a plan.
Sorry, Kevin, yes, yeah. I'm here. Yes, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, of course, Ken. Yeah, so we are looking to kind of give an overview around to all members on Friday, send out an all-member briefing on Friday, just to give a bit of a brief overview of exactly what we're doing in the Estates Transformation, kind of what an agile workspace is, what an integrated service hub is, and to provide a little bit more detail. And as a lot of you will be aware, we have sessions booked in for next week to talk in a bit more detail around, pick up on some of the points around actually some of that information around some of those buildings that are potentially looking to kind of not have, or what the discussions would look like. So we're going to be having quite a detailed engagement next week with members, and they are booked into people's calendars. And within this, we will be talking in a lot more detail around actually what this means to people, what this means to towns, how we are linking it with the localism agenda and the devolution agenda, and actually how we've been using some of the work that's been doing the play shaping to start to shape actually what this means to towns and how we can start to help solve some of the potential issues within those areas. So that's a bit of a brief overview, and then we are then looking to kind of do a bit more kind of all-member briefing as well in January time, and provide a bit of a forum for people to come and ask us questions. So where if they have a query or anything from their constituents or anything, they want to ask us a question, there's an interactive form they can use to ask those questions. So we really want to kind of build this engagement up, and ideally we'd like to start doing that next week and throughout the next few months, and then we will then start upon tranche 2 from February onwards with the same kind of process.
May I come back, Chair?
Yeah.
Yes, certainly, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. I accept the apology from Kevin, but this is a major project for the whole of Cornwall. And just endorsing what Councillor Frost has said, you know, we have got to go out into our communities, and we don't know what's going on, and we should not have found out about it in this way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Monk, please.
Thanks for that. I actually, with the actual report itself, I actually found it easier to digest and understand than the previous one we had on the estate transformation. So I'm not too concerned about the content of the report is a different matter, but I understand it a bit more. I've got about 3 questions. The first one, I thought all these assets that Cornwall Council owned, and I get why we want to sell them off and consolidate our position. A lot of them are older buildings, not efficient, etc., that we need to move on or invest in. However, I thought all these assets were subject to sort of devolution back to the town and parish councils or any other community group who could make a valid business case to retaining them. So I don't know whether any consultation has been had with the town or parishes about whether you're actually allowed to just sell them off, or are you saying that devolution's over? So that'd be my first question, but if I can continue. Much like Councillor Frost has said as well, it's given any developer now, or any person who wants to buy a property and hang on to it, showed them our negotiating hand before we've even started. It's the worst way of actually being able to sell an asset. If you turn around and say, look, I'm trying to sell this car for £5,000, but I'm skint. I'm about the bailiffs are coming around tomorrow and I need to get rid of it. You're not exactly going to hold out your asking price, are you? And that leads me on to the final thing, is that if any of these assets do get sold or moved on, what I do fear that happening is, in the current climate, that they're going to be left empty for years and years and not developed and just sat there empty ruins. Like we've got in Newton, we've got some old hotels that are testament to this, where people just buy them in a speculative manner and then hang on to them for as long as possible without actually doing anything with them and moving them on and improving them. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. And then at the end of the day, whatever sort of hybrid working we return to, which is going to be a mixture of working from home, are we just going to sell all these assets and then end up having to rent some really flush, modern, new, expensive office suites? So any cost saving that we get or any asset that we realise is just going to end up spending more money on relocating the staff into plusher working conditions or plusher workspace. Well, thank you. You can answer some of those. That'd be great.
Okay, yeah, Councillor Monk, can I just pick them up one at a time? You're obviously right. We have got a process we would go through in terms of selling them, or selling the asset is possibly the last thing on that list of things we want to try and do. We actually want to try and work absolutely with our town and parish councils and look at devolution. In fact, we've already mentioned that linking to localism and devolution is a really important part of what we see in this programme. So looking at the assets that will be left behind, in a sense, or once we've decided that we're going to create a new hub in a building in a town, and there might be other buildings, we absolutely going to be working with the local communities on devolution opportunities for those first, long before we get to actually this one is probably going to be released into the market. So I take the point about would developers get an idea on this, and will they therefore try and buy an asset, and will the town be blighted because there's no real plans for that? And we absolutely know that actually working our plan out for the assets left behind is actually an imperative. We do not want to see, nobody will want to see, and we certainly don't want to see as part of our programme, to see any building boarded up for absolutely an inordinate amount of time in a town. But we are conscious that actually that we have to be very careful how we therefore look at the devolution repurposing. And you don't want to bring a whole lot of buildings into the market at a point when we've already got quite a depressed market after post-COVID. So it's a very, very sensitive topic, and I do get that one. And in terms of your view about the hybrid working and the potential that we might be looking to rent, well, that is definitely not the case. We're still retaining our main campus sites. We've got New County Hall, we've got Tudor Vale, we've got Dalcoath in Camborne, and we've got obviously St John's in Penzance as principal, if I call that the agile workspace office hub. So we are not going to be looking to rent any other spaces. In the hubs that we're going to be building, where we're going to bring together frontline services into maybe a new space, there's still going to be an element of back office touchdown ability. So people have still got the opportunity to come and work close to home in one of those two. So I do not see we will be looking to rent any additional space in the future. We will have sufficient, and we've already modelled on the 2 to 3 days a week, and modelling that we've got more than ample space to accommodate our staff. Sorry, you're on mute, Councillor Monk.
Sorry, if I could just come back very briefly.
Of course.
We've just to use a point in case, we've had a building in Newquay that Cornwall Council owned, and the Town Council ended up buying it back from Cornwall Council. But that whole process took about 3 or 4 years, and in the meantime, we had the local population was up in arms saying, you know, what's happening with this? This needs to happen. That needs to happen. And then it took about 3 years for us to actually get our hands on it, and now we've just about redeveloped it and stuff. So it's about a 4-year process, and that just takes a very, very, very long time once it gets into the legal departments at Cornwall Council to be actually able to devolve them back. So any of these sites that you've allocated and put on a map, you know, you're trying to put a time scale on getting hold of one of those and then devolving it and/or selling it. You're into years and years.
We do understand that, absolutely. I mean, this is the, you know, 4 or 5 year program that's going to take this, and some of them are going to take some considerable time. And so, therefore, we have already built some modelling around what we at this stage is modelling. It's not the reality, because we know the reality of what we will get for a building v what we think it's valued at, thoroughly different. And the market's going to dictate that if we decide to. And you're right, there is going to be a whole timetable to working, and that's all part of that next stage where we need to get much more involved in detailed engagement. This has all been a bit at arm's length, and now we need to really get involved with the local communities in each one of these areas, in each one of these towns, to look at those assets and look at what opportunities are. So I think that's our next big step.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Keeling, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I certainly understand the concerns of Councillor Frost. I mean, I feel that this should have been an all-member brief long before we'd actually put it before scrutiny. But to be fair, we have been on this journey for a long time, in fact, since 2009. So I hope that we can, if we're going to get rid of assets, if we're going to dispose of buildings, particularly those that have a sort of relationship with local people, then they go through cabinet, so at least scrutiny can then have an opportunity to look at that decision and possibly call it in. That is important, that we follow that process, in my opinion. I did have a couple of questions, but I've been listening to that more. One is on page 80, you talk about the farms portfolio. Now, the cost to keep is 1.7 million and the revenue generated is 1.5. Well, when I was on the farms panel, it was used to make an healthy profit. So I wonder what's happened to that. I was going to ask also about page 76 with paragraph 6.1, where you talk about the programme has the potential to realise significant benefits, and you go through those, including a reduction in backlog maintenance of 35 million. But you also say that the benefits would require a significant gross capital investment, and I would like some idea of what that investment would be, because we'd have to service that cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keeling. I think I'd have to ask other colleagues to come back about the farm estate. I've got other colleagues who know much more detail about that to give you a proper answer on that one. So maybe I'll have to pick that one up and come back to you on that one separately. In terms of the whole backlog maintenance and investment plan, as you said, there is absolutely an issue with the backlog maintenance. Clearly, by investing in new, more efficient, more effective buildings, we'll be able to reduce down that backlog maintenance significantly. And as buildings, as we said, become repurposed to be found, then there'll be a new way of dealing with that. So there's a whole set of financial modelling behind it, Professor Keeling, that actually shows out the detail of that. And I'm sure we will be bringing that, absolutely, as you say, through to in our business cases. That will be the opportunity for scrutiny to look in detail at those capital investments per tranche, and in our business case process that we'll be bringing next year, we'll be bringing that through.
Okay, I'd just like some reassurance that if we're going to release assets or buildings, they will go through cabinet and give us an opportunity to be on the cabinet report.
No, that will be part of each tranche. We'll have that through. You'll be able to look at those individual buildings and what the plans are for.
Right, thank you very much.
Ben, did you want to come in at this stage? I see you put across in the box on a couple of occasions. Is there anything you want to add at this stage?
No, I wanted to come in earlier regarding the conversation of bobbing, which I did. That's fine. And just to provide assurance that we, Kevin, you're still sharing your screen, by the way.
Am I still?
And yes, and just reassurance that the business case process for the towns will be going to Cabinet and therefore go through our standard, the governance that you'd all come to expect.
Okay, I'm going to continue with Councillor Atherfold, please.
Yeah, on page 90, if we take my division, Camborne, Dulcoath refurb, agile workspace, net capital cost 5.38 million, gross saving 375,362. I spent a lot of time at Dulcoath, normally in the planning department. How are we justifying refurbing at that sort of cost?
Sorry, am I still sharing my screen? I do apologise. I thought I hadn't stopped. Have I stopped sharing my screen now?
You have now, Kevin. Thank you.
Okay, my sorry. In terms of what we're talking about, that space at Dulcoath, Councillor, is that actually, as we were saying, that the new forms of workspace that we're going to have in the future will not be as they're currently laid out, to allow us to have the sort of type of collaborative environments that we're going to be having in the future that support the new type of dynamic worker styles that we have. We will be looking to do a light refurbishment of existing buildings like that to make sure they're repurposed to allow us to support that new form of working. That's what we're referring to there, not an overall complete. We haven't got when we are going to be doing much more detail on that, working that through. So that is our provisional estimates based on the scope that we've currently considered. So there will be much more work to look at that, and we'll be bringing that about through our business case process.
So to be clear, a light
and we also have an integrated service hub. I do forget we have an integrated service hub in Dulcoath, and that will allow us to bring some of the services into the building as well.
But I'm still at a loss to understand how a light refurb at Dulcoath, which is in pretty good nick as it stands, costs 5.38 million. I mean, I could build a number of buildings for that sort of money.
Well, as I said, there is an actual integrated service hub and all that will require more investment in, as well as the refurbishment and the change to the building. I mean, there is more detail on that, and we can share that. But that was the estimates that we've worked on so far, based on the scope that we believe will be needed. And I said there will be an opportunity to challenge and scrutinise that when it comes back in more detail.
I think that would be really, really useful, because that doesn't sit comfortably with me as a good use of taxpayers' money.
Well, we're also looking to invest it to make it a greener building as well. So that's another important part of what we're trying to look at, the energy systems. So, that's a big part of that as well, potentially.
Okay.
Ben, I think you want to come back in again. Sorry.
I just want to make the point again that all of these are subject to business cases, which have the full costings of experts that are understanding what we need to do, and also the benefits. And absolutely, Councillor Atherfold, if they don't stack up, then the business case doesn't work. So, I think at the minute the team have tried to put costs together to give us an idea and a flavour, as opposed to making investment decisions on the basis of these. But they would be feeding in, and they would be subject to all of the checks and balances that you'd expect to see in a good business case.
It'd be good to see that. It really would.
Absolutely. And at the appropriate time, there's probably some information that's backing this up, so we can do that. But also at the appropriate time of those business case approvals, that's when we can also, and we would expect to be engaging and sharing on that.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Barnes, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm very similar to the rest of my colleagues. It sounds like it's Grumpy Councillors Day, but I think the staff should realise that the members aren't happy and need to perhaps look at this again. I've seen Ruth mentioned on page 85 and page 105, but no one's bothered to pick up the phone and say, can we discuss this with you? So it seems to me no surprises is gone out the window and is conveniently forgotten when the officers don't want to bother with it. I don't mind that people having an all members briefing, but when you come to making decisions in truth, I want you to talk to me. I don't want you to talk to other people, someone from Gunnislake or Liscard or out on the Rosen who don't really know the town or how the people of my town feel. So I want you to talk to me. I also saw something there saying something about Councillor Gibbons. I'm not sure what that's all about. And as much as you can have an all-member briefing, I would like more detail be placed before our CPIR meetings that we have on a Tuesday in the Campbell and Maduka area. And part of this also seems a bit of a fait accompli. You know, you're going to bring it in March, okay it in July, and it'll be job done. Well, I don't think that's going to happen. And I'm very concerned about, as Councillor Frost said, about there seem to be a lot of dots and different symbols placed anywhere. And I want to know the details behind it, what you've got planned for Redruth North in particular. Because my division at present takes in the main street, Forest Street, and the industrial estate and the brewery site. So I want to know what you're up to, because I got to be honest, I don't trust you. I am very concerned about what you're all up to. And I understand the senior management are just wanting to clear the decks, have a quick fire sale, get some money in, get rid of the old buildings. But I'm very concerned about what's being proposed.
I think Ben, do you want to drop in?
Can I bring Ben in on that stage? And I take the view that whatever we might feel about this report, that you know, officers are doing their best and come at these things from the best possible motives. So if I could just say that, Ben, would you like to just respond to a couple of things there, please?
Yeah. Firstly, so thank you for the support, Chairman. I think that is important to state that officers aren't trying to pull a fast one as suggested. I think that the part of our challenge here is that this programme has been running, as Councillor Keeling has mentioned, for a long time, and there was a cabinet paper earlier in the year, back in February, March, and the Scrutiny Committee required an update of where we'd got to. Notwithstanding all of the other conversations and comments around information and detail within that, and the challenges that's provided, for which is unfortunate, and we've talked that through. I think it's really important to note that what Kevin has laid out to you all is that there is a process by which there will be business cases which go through the appropriate governance of Cornwall Council, which is a cabinet approval, which will then require scrutiny oversight beforehand. And those business cases are on a town-by-town basis. So the point here is each town will have the opportunity. We've got an engagement process between now and then, and we'll be talking about what this looks like for each town. And I feel that message is being lost slightly in the conversation. I just want to just come back to what this is providing is a basis on which to say, have a conversation. So in many towns, there is a lot of property. We know principle. I haven't heard anyone saying the principles are not correct. And we need to go through that engagement process. And that's what the team is saying. So I think that's really important, just to remind colleagues that we're not making decisions. We're not making specific proposals about things, because they all need to be subject to a business case, which needs to stack up. And that's absolutely correct.
Tracy, did you want to say anything on this? Tracy Langley?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't want to add to what Ben said, because I absolutely agree with him. Look, I mean, I would add, this is a hugely complicated piece of work, and not only is it complicated from an engagement perspective, it is really complicated from a technical perspective as well. And the team are trying to tread that line between enormous amounts of detail needed for technical proposals of the art of the possible, to making sure that there's enough available information to go out to engage with everybody who needs to be engaged with, so that we can together come up with the right answers. And I would absolutely say that it is our intention to engage as widely as possible on this, because it is so complicated. So any anything that any members want to say about us trying to pull fast ones is absolutely unfair, and I won't accept that for all of the officers who are working really hard to try and get this over the line for you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Barnes?
Yeah, I got to come back on that. I have to disagree totally with Tracy Langley. It's not greatly complicated. The simple thing to do is go to the local member first. As in many of these things, go to the local member first, hear what they've got to say, and it will make things a lot easier, because at present there's a lot of mistrust and members are being left out. The first person to go to, as with anything, whether it's a planning issue, housing, go to the local member. And the officers are so keen on this transformation business, they're all in their own little teams talking. They're not talking to the local members. If you want to know what's going on, talk to the local members. They'll guide you through. It's not rocket science. It's common sense.
Okay, I'm going to draw a line and move on now to Councillor Barnes. Councillor Brown, please.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what to say. I'm the only one of the St Austell councillors here today. I know that Jackie Ball was present this morning, and I'm assuming she's left for another meeting. And I don't want to be parochial, but I think the fact that in the officer introduction, St Austell was discussed in some detail about how the process had gone wrong is probably the best evidence that you've got that the process has gone wrong. And I don't think the process has gone wrong solely in relation to St Austell. I was talking to two councillors yesterday, one of whom represents a town which is in the first tranche, where that councillor thinks the process has been handled well and he's happy for it to proceed. Another councillor represented another town which is in the first tranche, and that councillor didn't think they'd been involved at all. Now, I must admit, I'm not sure how to word all this, and because I think the St Austell councillors were very unhappy. Jackie Bull and I both made representations yesterday to Mike Eathorne-Gibbons. He's been incredibly helpful, but I think he's been placed in a difficult position by not having been involved enough by officers. And I think ultimately the technical work the officers have done has probably been good. I'm not challenging their technical competence, but I think their political judgment has been appalling. And if we continue about this the same way, it's not going to get any better. Now, can I say where I would have started this exercise? I think it's accepted that less office space is going to be needed in the future. I say that, although I agree with the councillors who've observed, both in the last debate and this debate, that we don't yet necessarily know what the long-term effects of the COVID crisis are. So therefore, there is a danger of being a bit impetuous. But I would have thought the starting point for any new office review has to be a review of Truro relative to the rest of Cornwall. Now, we've been told in the discussion today that New County Hall is going to be retained. There would always be an option to sell that off. Does that mean Pydar House is going to be retained as well? In that case, two of the biggest offices in Cornwall will be in Truro. What proportion of the total office staff working in offices does that mean that officers think will be in Truro in future? And is that something that councillors all over Cornwall think is right? You know, I'm not saying what's right and what's wrong, but I think that ought to have been the starting point. I think the other starting point ought to have been, I would have more confidence in a report which was signed up to by the head of spatial planning and by the head of economic development. Because if we're going to change the uses of any buildings, then we have got to know what the planning context is, what the economic position is. And I'll remind councillors who've got on recently to the disaster in the first council. before I became a councillor, when officers put in a planning application to build a supermarket on the site of the main council offices in St Austell, and that was absolutely rightly refused by members on planning grounds. So I do think that, you know, for all sorts of reasons, you know, sort of better and more thoughtful engagement is needed. I think Councillor Frost set the tone well, and I think the real difficulty with this report, which I hinted at in the last item, is it's mixing up two things. It's mixing up a Cornwall strategy with a lot of local detail. Much of that local detail not being portrayed very clearly, and I would agree with the criticisms Councillor Frost has made. I think you would have done much better to have done a report just on Cornwall principles, tried to get support for that, then had a series of meetings with local divisional members. And although I don't word things as directly as Councillor Barnes, I think he's basically right what he's been saying just a few minutes ago. So, you know, I take the view, if I was on the committee, I would vote just for it to be noted. I don't think you ought to approve it today, and I would hope that that will give officers an opportunity to talk with the lead cabinet members, perhaps with group leaders as well, to try to establish a better way forward for how this can be taken through. Otherwise, I think you're going to continue to have a ride which is as rough as it's turning into today.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. That was very useful, very good. Thank you. Councillor Moorcroft, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry if I'm repeating what the point that Councillor Atherfold made about Camborne. It's so much about Shire Travail at Bodmin. The building was, I think, finished and occupied in 2015. Apparently in 2016 it won a Building of the Year award, and now you're spending 1.3 million, or planning to, sorry, of taxpayers' money on light refurbishment. I don't think that's going to go down very well, in similar vein to the points Councillor Frost has made. And who's costed that out, please?
Kevin, would you like to respond to that?
Yep.
Also,
Sorry,
I apologise to Councillor Brown. Kevin, to also respond to the comments of Councillor.
Yes, I wasn't going to come back and also
that's
Councillor Brown. So maybe can I just go back to Councillor Brown, please, first of all. And yes, you know, there was rightly an issue where we had. Although we had underpinned the wording about Caroline Road as being an option at that point, clearly, you know, we had said that we needed to align more closely with placemaking and with the town and with local members, and clearly we shouldn't have therefore had that in there. And the next part in the process is absolutely to be dealing more with the local members and all of the towns impacted as we, in the right time, to align with the tranches. In terms of the whole issue around where did we start with some of the modelling, that the assumptions around this, we clearly did make some assumptions around the outset of potentially 2 to 3 days a week at home, or 2 to 3 days a week in an office like in Truro, and ultimately in our business case we'll bring that back into what would be our desired and preferred outcome therefore for Pydar or with New County Hall. So there will be, when that Truro one comes back, they'll be full of the information that will allow us to look at that in more detail. So we'll bring that one back. So I hope that you know, we obviously will be looking to, as you rightly say, from now working and engaging more closely with our local members, and picking up your point about group leaders too. So we will pick all those points up. Now coming, Councillor Moorcroft, sorry, Cheetahvale. Again, there will be much more detail in the business case around what were our plans for. You're absolutely right. It was a great building that we built, and as you say, built. It was also one office of the year, well, not office, but won an office award. But I'm sad to say we've also not been, as a council, really investing in that building in terms of looking after it correctly too. And it's already got areas where we haven't been dealing with some of the maintenance topics. So some of this is about that as well, as well as actually looking to create the right sort of internal layouts that will support the future model.
Thank you.
Councillor Harris, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few comments to make. I am getting an impression, listening to officers here, that there's a slight impression I'm getting that it's all too difficult for members to understand. I'll go back to what Councillor Frost said at the beginning. And I'm afraid Councillor Frost used one of my favourite words, which was gobbledygook. There's a lot of gobbledygook in here. There was a particular thing Kevin said, talks about working with our partners at EY. So we brought external consultants in. What are they costing us? You talk about sales to Treveth. I get very cynical in some cases. And of course, if we sell an asset to Treveth, it's an internal transaction. We might find a value to suit us. But if we can't sell it somewhere else, we can sell it to Treveth. And of course, having sold it to Treveth, we then lend Treveth the money to pay for it at 5% and bring that revenue straight in, whether or not Treveth make the money. They're just some upfront comments. What's bothering me is the net capital receipts of £25 million we're talking about. If you go back to the original report to Cabinet in March of this year, it was talking about £75 million of capital receipts because they were looking at a programme costing between 150 and 200 million pounds. Now, a response I've got from officers says that through more robust challenge, a more comprehensive approach to financial modelling and working with stakeholders, these headline figures have improved. And therefore, we only need to realise £25 million. And yet, what Kevin has said is that with the changed work plan, we probably need less space than we thought we needed in March. So why on earth have our intended disposals dropped from 75 million to 25 million pounds? And just on that 25 million pounds, I'm very confused. At one stage, we're talking about sales, because this is what helps to pay for the 75 million pound of investment we need to make, including 5 million pound for light refurbishment of Dalcoath, where I agree with Councillor Atherfold. But in the next breath, I think what Mr. Eder said, well, I wrote it down here, was we don't want to sell assets. So when we're looking at savings from this, our gross savings come down significantly because we're going to have to borrow the entire 75 million pound for this refurbishment. I really think that a lot of this that's unthought out and undetailed. There's not sufficient detail here for anybody to do anything. I'm not even sure I can note this, but I'm an outlier at this committee. Thank you.
Fine. Can I just come back and make one or two comments on that? Coming back about the comment about EY, EY actually were helping and assisting us with some of our work on corporate landlord. They also provided some empirical evidence around other benefits achieved in other authorities. So we took some of that data and help us support what we considered to be some of the overall benefits that we would get, some of the wider economic benefits based on numbers of people in towns, based on economic development. So it was just some work around that. In terms of the sales to Treveth, as Ben already said, this paper is around estates transformation, and the whole of the Treveth situation sits in our commercial portfolio and is not part of this paper. So there is going to be more detail around that one, and there will be further papers coming on that topic through a separate route. And down to your comments around net capital receipts, clearly you're absolutely right. Originally, the programme was based on potentially 75 million of capital receipts, supporting a much bigger programme. Clearly, our remodelling has allowed us to reconsider actually what we really need to invest in a sort of post-COVID world. And also that original assumption around those levels of capital receipts was based on a different more maybe a more ambitious view on the market at that point, and clearly that's been massively impacted by the pandemic, and we won't be coming the other side of that for some time soon. So the whole business about net capital receipts via the income that we need to invest, there's a lot of work being put behind that, and that we will be bringing that back through our business case position to overview and scrutiny on tranche 1 and for further tranches as we go through.
Sorry, can I come back, Chair?
Yeah, yes.
Sorry, Mr. Eder just said our views in March were on a slightly more ambitious view of the market. That's from 75 million pound to 25 million pound. His comments on Treveth were that would come back on a different chain. We've heard comment this morning about not working in silos and yet we're just now talking about working in absolutely in silos. And then finally, before I'm interrupted, can I just be clear? Are we still using EY as consultants, or was it a one-off job? And what are they costing us? Thank you.
I just on that EY one, they've completed the actual work supporting the estates transformation program to date, helping us with that business cases, and that's actually now tailing off, and we are now moving forward entirely with that. I'm not sure what I can comment in terms of how much that has cost. I would need to go back and find that information and find that for you. And in regards to you know,
can I come in on the silos, Kevin?
Yeah, I was going to comment on
Thank
that.
you.
But anyway.
Councillor Harris, thanks for that. I take your point about the silos, but I think with the asset base that the council have got, 4,500 assets, 92 million square metres of land owned, it isn't unreasonable to try and create conversations on that asset, on an asset by asset kind of basis, and we've tried to class those in as few as boundaries as possible. I think it is reasonable that there is an overall strategy for that, and we need to be working and defining that better. But as Kevin's kind of said, that the conversation today is about how we use our operational estate in a different way. There is a commercial estate, there is a farms portfolio, and there is a community portfolio. And it may well be that we try and work out a way of bringing that together at place. So when we're having conversations with local members, we can talk about all of that. But as you'll appreciate, with a number of those different classes, the way that we enact it would be different. And I think that's why the team is right to see that. But maybe we need to think about how that comes together at a local level, and we'll take that away.
Could I just say something from the chair a moment? I still have about half a dozen speakers. I mean, I think it's perfectly clear to everyone that the recommendations have to be revisited. There is concern on all fronts, all political groups on the council, that the officers need to revisit this. Councillor Frost, set the tone as the first speaker, and I think it's been replicated by Councillor Barnes, members of the Conservative group, right across the Councillor Brown. So I think I don't want to stop other members from commenting, but as chair, I certainly hear the message that's coming through. So we are going to have to revisit that recommendation. Just moving on now to Councillor Biggs is my next speaker.
Thank you, Chairman. Your timely intervention on your part as well, I think. I just to start with an easy question. I think I didn't quite understand this. We're talking about 4,300 assets. This committee's worked very well with former member of the council, former officer of the council, Dominic Barlow, who was very well respected, worked very well with this committee. And last time I heard, we've had 6,900 assets. So I don't quite understand where the numbers have gone down. I do agree with Ms. Langley that it is a very complex issue, because we got the transformation program 2, as I would call it. We've got the estates transformation. Part and parcel of that is the IT technology uplift. We've got the COVID-19 impact, which we don't know how long that will last and what that will translate into, but obviously some changes in people's working and requirements. And put it all in the mix, and it is extraordinarily complex. I think Councillor Brown was right in his analysis of how you start off with this in terms of engaging with the portfolio holder and so on. But could I offer some positive views on this? In the past, this committee has done some very good work, I think, in terms of having workshops. Now, I think those workshops only work really well face to face. I don't think our technology is good enough to facilitate the same kind of thing that we could do face to face. that seems to me perhaps an option that we might like to explore going forward, is to actually roll this into an informal closed session workshop with officers. That's a much better forum, I think, than what we're doing here today. Just ragging this report because we're unhappy with it is not being in any way constructive. I mean, we have the right to do that, and I understand that. And one perhaps for Ben, I just wonder where we're going in terms of. At some point, I would like to think that we would be heading towards interactive mapping with the addition of Power BI, where we could actually get into and actually have much more detailed information about the assets that we hold, what they're used for, how they're maintained, what their functionality is within the broader community. The whole advantages of that Power BI can bring. I think that this is surely a case where we must be looking at that. Now, again, I understand this is a big project, and we may not be able to do all of it at one time, but I'd certainly like to get some indication from our officers that that's the way that they're thinking about it. So I hope that's a little bit more positive, Chairman, anyway.
Yes, thank you for that. As I said, all I would say on this is I think officers have got the message on this now from right across the political spectrum of the council. As a scrutiny committee, we stand ready and willing to work with you to deliver this project and to help you in any way we can. So we've got, I think, 3 more speakers, but if there's anything sort of helpful we can say, I think the message. I think the officers have got the message. If we can help the officers in any way on this, I think we should try and do that. Councillor Mould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say to Ben and Kevin, I'm sorry, we have trashed right over your day today, and we cannot lay all this at your door. There is a process for all of this. This has been brought together, and a report has been asked to be delivered, and we've got it. And I think perhaps there are questions to be answered further up the line, especially around this business of we heard at full council we wouldn't have any more surprises. So, I thank them both for their hard work today, and they've stood there and taken it all on the chin, and it must be quite disheartening when you've worked so damned hard and then we all come along and trash it. But my point for raising the X, Mr. Chairman, was I would like to second Councillor Taylor's proposal that we just note this this agenda item today, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mould. I'll take that into consideration when we get to the end, which is fast approaching. I think I'll take Councillor Burden first because he hasn't spoken on this issue so far.
Well, I was going to speak on some of the bits of detail rather than the whole thing. But I think our new officers, as they are in post, must realise that what has happened at Pider House has appalled us. Millions spent on that pathetic building, which is so difficult to access. No car park or anything. And, whoever, and I'm not going to name the officer, but whoever got that through, I mean, it's appalling. And it's still horrible. It's still drafty. And people do not like working there. So we don't want that repeat again, but that was all done behind closed doors, and it all happened, without any member knowing. So we don't want that again. Talking about working differently, it's interesting, it was all hot desking and all the rest. Do you know what? Several of my family work for the police. They all have their own desk, their own computer. Nobody touches it when they're not there. I know it's important jobs with the central crime computer and all that, but they've gone back to ditching hot desking because it doesn't work very well. The other thing was you've raised the backlog of maintenance. I've been chirping about this for years. When I saw buddleias growing out of the gutters at Old County Hall, quite decent sized plants, 3 or 4 feet high, I did complain, oh yes, we haven't got time to get around to it. You know, keeping the building dry is the most important thing of all. And I've built several roofs. But getting back to the two things I'm concerned about, really, and that was the little bits now, because I can see where the members are going, and I understand and their venom in a way, is that I know how much 2 million will deliver, because I've done it. And you've just put down figures like for Lanston, 4 million and something. You won't do it for that. You'll never do it. I know how much building costs, and you know how much concrete costs a load now. It's horrendous. And so I don't know where you've got these figures from, but it's going to be overspend all the time. And the other thing, which I am, and I think the deputy leader is also concerned about, is this car parking. The first 4, you've taken away residents' car parking in the Scard, and now on the other 3, it says lack of parking. We're a huge interland of rural people. And if we go to our market town, as we are accustomed, that's where we do our shopping, that's where we do our banking. You know, some of us still go to the bank. We have to park somewhere. We aren't all going to be on some bus that never arrives. And if you have these hubs, and you have people with children, disabled people, learning disabled activities, you need car parking. And so please don't put any in without some car parking. It hasn't got to be masses, but it needs to be some, because else these centres are going to be a very strange place with our wonderful traffic enforcement officers walking up and down the street as they do to make sure they put lots of tickets on. And I just think that we've got to be very careful in what you deliver, because the people must accept it as good and not as a cock-up and a waste of money. Thank you.
Hopefully that'll come out in the consultation process. I owe an apology to Councillor Ellenbrook because I missed her out. Councillor Ellenbrook, please, please ask your question.
Thank you very much, Chairman. No problem at all. Couple of things from me. I mean, I'm not going to add anything to what anybody else has said, but in this operational portfolio, 2 things that concern me that are mentioned, or one in particular, is adult social care hubs. Now, I'm a member of the Adult Social Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and I don't think we've had that discussed with us. So I do think if you're looking at these things, you need to make sure that they go back, and I assume Together for Families, which is the children's, may not have heard about this either. The only other point I would make is that devolution is all very well, but I know from something that was tried to be devolved to the Town Council here in Redruth, the maintenance backlog was so appalling that we did not want to take on that building because it had basically been neglected for the past probably 5 or 6, even more years. So I do think that when we're looking at all this, we really do have to be mindful of, if you're going to be disposing of property, it needs to be in a fit state, because the community cannot take on assets like this if they are in such a poor state that it costs too much money for them to be renovated. But I would like to know, have you actually been talking to the relevant overview and scrutiny committees on things such as adult social care hubs and the Together for Family hubs? Thank you.
Someone like to comment on that?
I'll bring Kevin in a moment. Thank you. I think it's fair to say, so this would be the first OSC that we've come and talked to, and the view would probably be of the team that through the engagement processes in order to develop those business cases would be having that local and then other engagement. But Kevin may be able to add a little bit more to some of the other engagement that's happened before now, with colleagues in adult social care and TFF, but I know it probably hasn't gone to the OSC to answer your question directly, Councillor Ellenbrook.
No, yeah, I just concur with that, Ben. We haven't actually been to other overview and scrutinies, but what we have done, Councillor Lambrook, we have actually met with each one of DLTs for adult social care and Together for Families to review the whole principle of the integrated service hub, and we've actually already started to have that more detailed dialogue with them about exactly how that one is going to look and how it's going to deliver the type of service they're looking to achieve from that. So we've been around all the DLTs and we're working very closely with the service heads, and we're already undertaking much more detailed engagement around some of the individual projects in tranche one as well. That's already started, but we haven't taken it to specific overview and scrutiny panels related to those two.
So if I could come back on that, and
Yeah.
There is a huge concern, and again I reflect what Councillor Frost said at the very beginning about people being concerned. I sit on one of the partnership boards set up by Healthwatch, representing Cornwall Council on the Carers Partnership Board, and I know throughout COVID there's been a huge problem for those people who are caring, who have lost all access to daycare, assistance, respite care, etc., etc. And I just think that there will be huge anxiety from the public on things like talking about potentially, and this, I'm afraid this reads very much as we're trying to get rid of stuff, so potentially losing very, very important to our vulnerable residents, social care hubs, and also Together for Family hubs. So I don't want to labour the point because I accept what you're saying, but I do think that that is a cohort that also needs to be considered, and I think overview and scrutinies and both adults and children need to have a good heads up on this, because I know we have concerns already about the suffering that COVID has caused to these vulnerable people. But thank you.
Any comment on that, Kevin, Ben?
Well, I certainly know from the fact that I think there is definitely a lot of work going on also around that whole care issue. I know we're having quite some detailed dialogue with Together for Families about how the service hub will work, and also some aspects of adult social care. But I think there is another piece of work going on separately to that as well about that. So I'm quite sure, Councillor Lambrook, that we are certainly not looking to withdraw those sort of services from our communities. It's about making sure we can look at the most efficient way of dealing with those in terms of, is there duplication of properties? Can we find a better way of bringing them together to deliver a more integrated way of delivering that service?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kirkham, and then that's going to be the last speaker. I want to move then to the recommendations. I think we've made our views clear right across the political spectrum of the council, and I would say to officers, work with us, and we do want to be supportive, but take us into your confidence. Councillor Kirkham, please.
Before she comes in, could I, Richard, Chairman, could I comment as it falls within my portfolio?
Well, I'll take you after Councillor Kirkham if you like.
Okay, that's fine.
Councillor
Sorry, Mike. I'm sorry, I've come in a bit late, but yeah, basically to say what Barbara said and ask about children and adult social care. Now, Falmouth is a big town of over 20,000 people, and this document seems to indicate that the two children's centres, the Lighthouse and the Kimberley Park one, will be shut, and a new hub will be built up at the top of Tregenva Road. Now, to get there from Old Hill, it's 2 buses. People won't go there. They've just lost the Beacon project in Old Hill. I'm very scared that places like Old Hill and the Beacon will go back in time if they lose everything, because there will be nothing left there. There will be no community building there anymore at all. So those issues are something that, although you may be looking on a map and saying, well, that spot could cover those people in that entire town, there will obviously be more to it than that, because there will be certain communities within that town which won't be served anymore. So just a plea for local consultation there.
Thank you, Councillor Kirkham. I can absolutely assure you that that's part of the next stage in terms of detailed consultation. That may very well and will probably change some of the assumptions that we used when we built some of this. Clearly, we were trying to do some of this work remotely because of the lockdown and because of, we weren't able to engage as much as we would like to do, but we will be ensuring that we absolutely do that in the next stage, which will refocus and reshape some of this, I'm quite sure.
Thank you.
Councillor Eathorne Gibbons, you just want to say something?
Yes, if I may, please, Chairman. I've listened to the discussion today. Lots of very interesting points. As Councillor Brown said early on, I was rather put in the situation of having a paper that was in the members' domain without having a chance to oversee it before it went out, because I do have a number of queries on it. Many of those points have been raised today in terms of the assumptions and basis for various things, whether it's the retention or disposal of some of the assets, the basis for some of the capital receipts, the basis for the refurbishment costs, the basis for the sequencing, etc., etc. So there are a lot of issues there. I think the one point that might be helpful is really to recognise the principles behind the transformation, which is essentially that we are aiming for one main office in each main town, and secondly that there will be an early engagement with local members on options. I think that is important, that members, not just in St Austell, sorry Councillor Brown, but there are other areas, and people do need to be consulted on that. So I think that's all I wanted to say at the moment, Chairman, just to provide an overview on it. I look forward to what the committee comes forward in terms of recommendations, but certainly from my perspective, a lot more work needs to be done to pull not just the office changes, but put that in context with other property developments that are coming forward as well. That's all I wanted to say at the moment, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike, for that. Councillor Taylor, I'm coming back to you because you proposed an amendment, and I just wanted to check your wording and to ask Tracy Clark to incorporate your wording and to advise members accordingly.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually looking to you for some procedural advice, because I actually asked for this recommendation to be noted, but the presentation, and with no disrespect to the officers, is of such poor quality and has so many questions unanswered. I'm actually wondering, can we not just ask for this recommendation to be removed until such times as it can come back to this overview and scrutiny with all the questions answered, and definitely for all the members to have had their briefing? Is that a permissible action?
Tracy Clark, could you advise me on that, please?
I think if you remove that recommendation entirely, then you've had, you know, a very long debate this afternoon with absolutely no result, and there's nothing else on the table. It might be better if you said something like that officers take member comments on this topic into account during further development of the estate transformation programme, or something like that, if members were minded to do that. Otherwise you've got an extremely long item and no outcome at all. You know, it would be good if you could have some sort of recommendation on the table out of it.
Councillor Taylor,
yeah,
on that?
Is it permissible to say that we cannot, this committee cannot support or note this recommendation, and ask that it is taken back and brought back with all our questions and concerns noted?
Yes,
I am sorry, but this recommendation is really, really poor, and you can tell from the debate that there's so much about it that is just not, we're not happy with it.
Yes, that's certainly permissible, that the committee feels that it cannot support or note this recommendation, and that officers be asked to come back with a further report noting all the questions, with all the questions and concerns noted.
Well, I would like to propose that, if I may, withdraw my original proposal to note and propose exactly the words that Tracy's just used.
Right.
Is this a deferral?
Just let Tracy Clark just simulate those comments a moment, and Tracy, when you're comfortable, if you could read that out. I'm then going to go to Councillor Barnes because he might be proposing another amendment. But Tracy Clark, could you just reflect on what Councillor Taylor has said and read that out to us, please?
Okay, so the proposal is that the committee feel they cannot support or note this recommendation, and that officers be asked to come back with a further report taking into account the committee's questions and concerns noted at this meeting. If Councillor Taylor's happy with that, we'd need to go to Councillor Mould to see whether or not, because she seconded the original proposal.
I'm certainly happy with that, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mould, are you happy to second that?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to go to Councillor Barnes because I think Councillor Barnes wants to move an amendment.
I'm willing to accept that alteration to the amendment, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, is there anyone else that wants to make an amendment or to comment on before we go to the vote? Are we? No, I think we're okay on that. No other crosses. Okay, Councillor Monk, you just seconding. You're just going to second Councillor Taylor's amendment, are you?
Yeah, if Councillor Mole's doing it, that's fine.
Okay, that's fine. Now, Tracy Clark, are we clear on the amendment, which we're going to take first? Councillor Barnes, your hand's up now. You've got your hand up, Councillor Barnes? No, you've not. Yeah, okay.
No.
Okay. Now, I will ask Tracy Langley, do you want to comment or say anything on this at this stage, Tracy?
No, Chairman. I'm happy. I'm happy with that as a general response. More than happy. We just might want to take into consideration that in the forward plan there are business cases coming back in July. So you may want to think about the wording with reference to that.
Yeah, yes, okay. I'd just like to reiterate something I said earlier, and that is that, I'm sure I speak for the whole of the Scrutiny Committee when I say, we'd be more than happy to work with the officers on that, on this subject. We understand it's important, we understand it isn't easy, but do take us into your confidence and involve us at an early stage. I'm gonna go to Tracy Clark to conduct the vote.
Mr. Chairman, I need to ask a question. Surely we should be doing something before next July. Shouldn't we have another report before this council disappears?
Well, let's take that up when we meet to look at the agenda later in the month, and we'll deal with that then. Because I'm hoping that the officers will reflect on the way this has been presented, and we'll have something to discuss or to note later. But we've been on this now for an hour and 3/4, which I think is pretty good. So I would like to move to the vote now. So Tracy, will you conduct the vote, please?
Chairman. Dave Biggs, I think Councillor Burton has made a very good point, and we've been given a steer from our officers about the timeline to July. I think the recommendation should make some reference to time. I think that's important.
Okay, Tracy Langley.
Thank you, Councillor Biggs. I think that was my point. So you may want to think about whether you have a report back beforehand or as the business cases are going through. I think that was my point. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm looking at Councillor Taylor. Do we need just to add a few words on to Councillor Taylor's amendment?
Thank you, Chair. I think I would like to just go back to Councillor Biggs from his experience, what he considers to be a timely date to be putting in there for this to come back to this committee, please.
We've got two more committees in this council. One I think is the 26th of January and the other one's on the 16th of March, I believe.
Councillor Biggs, could I defer to you for your judgment on this one, please?
Chairman, is that okay?
Yeah, by all means. By all
I
means.
mean, what we could incorporate in the recommendation is to come back no later than the 16th of March.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, good, thank you.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barnes, you've got a cross in the box.
Yeah, I'll go along with that 16th of March, but if this report's going to take as long as this item to discuss, it'll never be done.
Thank you. Tracy Clark, could you just read out the revised amendment, please?
Yes, certainly. So this is proposed by Councillor Taylor, and then we'll ask Councillor Mould whether she takes on board the further amendment. The committee feel that they cannot support or note this recommendation and ask officers to come back with a further report no later than the 16th of March 2021, taking into account the committee's concerns and questions noted at this meeting.
Okay, Councillor Taylor, you happy with that? That was okay?
Absolutely, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Mould, you happy with that?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, very much. Thank you.
Very much. Tracy Langley, I'll pass over to you now to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chairman. And so I will call out the committee member names in turn. Please confirm your name and advise whether you vote in favour of or against or abstain from the vote. So Councillor Atherfold.
Councillor Atherfold, 4.
Councillor Barnes.
Councillor Barnes, 4.
Councillor Biggs.
Biggs, 4.
Councillor Burden.
Neil Burden, 4.
Councillor Buscombe.
Richard Buscombe, 4.
Councillor Eddy.
Councillor Eddy, 4.
Councillor Fitter.
4.
Councillor Frost.
Councillor Frost, 4.
Councillor Hawkins.
Councillor Hawkins, 4.
Councillor Keeling.
Keeling, 4.
Councillor Monk.
Monk, 4.
Councillor Moorcroft.
Moorcroft, 4.
Councillor Mould.
Mould, 4.
Councillor Taylor.
Taylor, 4.
And Councillor White.
4.
Thank you. And Chairman, I can confirm that that's unanimous.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Tracy. Now, as I mentioned a few moments ago, we've been on that for an hour and 3/4. I propose a 5-minute comfort break now before we come back and listen to the Cabinet members and their reports and updates. So, a 5-minute break, back at 3:20. Is that okay with everyone?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. So, see you all at 3:20. Welcome back, members. I'd like now to move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is the update from Cabinet members. Now, I guess that I know these were circulated on Friday, as is our practice now. Unfortunately, the leader has had to leave us because of the length of time we took on the last item.
I'm still here.
Oh no, you're still here, right? So
Thank
you.
Thank you.
And I'm right in saying your update was circulated at the end of last week, Leader. So, questions to the Leader on his update, please. Anything for the Leader? Okay, nothing for the Leader.
No, yeah, sorry, I'm trying to do me X. Yeah, Gillian, I know you give reports on the COVID job. How is it? Carrington's got a problem. Have you got any update?
No. So Cornwall has got the lowest numbers of primary authorities in the country. We're urging people to be cautious with what they do. We don't want to be going up into tier 2 heading towards Christmas or after the Christmas break. There's widespread recognition from directors of public health that there probably will be a rise in cases after the Christmas break because of people coming together. So take care over the Christmas break, try and limit your amount of contacts, and then hopefully we'll see more vaccines rolled out, and that will really help to move us along into 2021.
Yeah, it's only that the schools have quite a lot of problems, and Chavaris, the Cornwall Care Home, has lost several patients in this last week. So I was just wondering if you had any further news on whether they had controlled the problem at Carrington, of all places.
Public health team continue to work with particular sites.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Barnes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like the Leader to comment on an email I received from a gentleman from the St Austell area about Langarth Park, saying this council paid 1.45 million for a piece of land that was sold to the developer for £100,000. Is that true or not?
So there's been a lot of discussion about this. It's not in my portfolio, so I'm not going to comment further. Thank you.
Well, I thought as the Leader of the council you know everything.
Well, I don't know about everything. I may or may not know about this, Councillor Barnes, but it's not in my portfolio, so I'm not commenting.
Okay.
Councillor Fitter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I haven't, unfortunately, I haven't seen the Leader's briefing for Friday. I've been busily searching for it, but so it doesn't matter. If I could just ask the Leader a question now about the forthcoming departure of the United Kingdom from Europe and the fact of whether we get a deal or a no deal. And I just wonder, sir, if I could ask you 2 questions. One, are we still at this moment in time, and I sincerely hope the answer is yes, maintaining or helping to maintain an office in Brussels so that we have continuing liaison with our European friends and partners? And the second thing is that on the Brexit planning, which I suspect the council, well, I know that you and the officers have been doing, have you had to readdress anything in case we do depart without a deal? And thanks for that. I'm sorry that it wasn't your, if it's not in your report. I do apologise.
Well, that's okay. It's in my portfolio. So, the leading on the Brexit issues. So the office in Brussels, yes, I can confirm that we still have that. We share the cost with the local enterprise partnership and the Cornwall-based universities. So I think it's really important that we're continuing to reach out to our friends and partners in Europe, that we continue to have access for our businesses, and that they have that intelligence, and that we can help to make trade and relationships as smooth as possible post-Brexit. In terms of Brexit, understanding of what's going to happen, it is difficult because of the not having a deal, and not understanding whether there will be a deal or if there will be no deal. So currently there's a number of examples we raised with the MPs on last Friday, where we've got immediate concerns. So for example, around movement of fish and animals, that we think that there's potentially the need for 19 new officers to be employed in that area. As expected, the licensing in that around fish exports is the way that we're expecting that to be. So there's a number of immediate issues on the 1st of January, but there's also the large issues of what happens with common agricultural policy that will have a huge impact on Cornwall. And we also had the announcement of the Shared Prosperity Fund, which was extremely disappointing. So we move out from the programme European funding for the 7 years to 2020. We were promised a replacement programme that would be of the same value, and we've got levelling up on top of that as well. But we're looking at a very small Shared Prosperity Fund next year. So in economic development terms, there's going to be a huge gap in the funding that we have been receiving and what we're looking to receive next year. So coming out of COVID, that's going to make it even more challenging for our businesses. So a real worry about what's going to happen post-Brexit. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you for your questions.
Councillor Kirkland, please.
Yeah, just very quick one, just after my regular update on what's happening with the airport and whether we've got anything from government yet.
Thank you. I think since the last meeting there was the announcement on business rates for
Oh yes, so that's right.
That's worth around $500,000, but it's around 5 million is the shortfall. So we're still in negotiations. We discussed this at the MPs meeting last Friday. Steve Double MP is continuing to work with ministers on this. Steve Double and myself met with the aviation minister a little while ago, and we also wrote from the LEP, myself, the relevant portfolio holder, and Councillor Taylor as leader of the Conservative group to the, I think it was Prime Minister, stressing the point and need for funding for the airport. So we continue to pursue further funding. Thank you.
Any other questions for the leader? Okay, thank you very much for that, Julian. Thank you very much.
I'll drop off now, thanks.
Yes, of course, yes.
Okay.
Moving on to Deputy Leader Adam Painter. Any questions for Adam Painter and his portfolio, please? Anything for Adam?
I'd like to know, does this portfolio control Landgarth Park?
Adam, are you there?
I do admire your tenacity, Councillor Barnes, and it's a very good question, but the answer would be no.
Okay.
Councillor Fitter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adam, you are the Chancellor of the Exchequer in role, and so I feel I'm entitled to ask you this question, even if it's not in your portfolio as such. But we have set aside about £5 million, I believe, as a contingency fund to cover any shortfall in the Cornwall Airport revenue. and that was out of the spaceport sum that was set aside. If we have to use this money, are you able to assure me that we will have a further source of funding from that, possibly that same pot, to make sure that the airport does continue? Because of course, if the airport was not to continue, we all know that you wouldn't actually have a spaceport. And so I just wondered if you could reassure me or help me in that direction. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Fitter. I can reassure you that the paper that we took through Cabinet was to use that capital money identified for the spaceport to ensure that the airports continue to operate. So you are absolutely right that without an airport, we certainly would not have a spaceport. So yes, we will use that money to plug any gaps, whilst we're obviously still, as Councillor German said, are working with CW, continuing to lobby government for support for the spaceport as well as obviously for the airport.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy Leader.
Anything else for Councillor Painter in his role as Deputy Leader? Okay, moving on to Councillor Ethel. Councillor Monk, are you in early for Councillor Ethel Gibbons or late for Councillor Painter?
Late for Councillor Painter or Mike, if that's possible. It's I know there's been some funding made available for up to 150 electric charging points across Cornwall, which is, I think it's some European funding, and it's a significant amount of money. I think it's 2.9 million. 150 charging points is quite a significant amount. And it would be great to install these across Cornwall, but what I'm a bit concerned about is that they actually have a strategic plan to install them rather than just putting them easily where they can across various areas. I'm just wondering if I can get involved, or they can point me in the direction of where the decision forming will be made to install these various charging points. Because obviously everyone knows, in the next 10 years you won't be able to buy a diesel car anymore. And you'll need to be able to charge your car up quite quickly. And if you've just got one random spot in the corner of a car park, if it takes 20 minutes to fully charge it, that's only 3 cars an hour. So I'd favour grouping them together in bigger areas if possible. But I'd just like to know where I can find where this decision is being made and if I can get involved.
Anyone help Councillor Monk on that?
I think we can ensure, Chairman, that Councillor Monk gets the details of that. I know whether Mike has got any further information from his property side, but I know the work is still ongoing, I think, looking at sites, but I'm sure we can identify the officer and let Councillor Monk get involved with exactly where that's going to be.
That'd be great. That'd be great if you could. Thank you very much.
Yeah, yes, there's very little I can add to that, Oliver. Certainly, we need to firm up a plan for installation, and Adam and I will make sure that you get some details of that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fenner.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a question to Mike Ephraim Gibbons, but if I could just reassure Ollie Monk that you will most certainly be able to buy a diesel car in 10 years' time. Indeed, you'll be able to buy one in 12 years' time, because what you won't be able to buy is a brand new one, certainly produced and brought into the United Kingdom. But I do believe, in actual fact, that if you were so minded, you could go to Germany and, in actual fact, buy a diesel car in Germany and import it. But there's plenty of second-hand ones going around for the next 20-odd years. But my question to Mike Ephraim Gibbon is this: Michael, could you please tell me who is responsible for marketing? And I know the company, but I want to know who is responsible from an officer point of view for the marketing of the plots of land at the Aero Hub at Newquay.
Right, that falls, first of all, a bit of light relief. I have an excellent diesel car, which I'm quite happy to sell. But moving on more seriously, in terms of marketing of the plot at the airport, that would fall within the Core Serve organisation, of which obviously Cal is a key player in that.
if I could just come back to you, I don't think actually that's factually correct. I'm just, in fact, I'm pretty sure it's not an actual fact. I just wondered if this was being handled in-house at Cornwall Council with Cornwall Council officers, or whether it's being handled by one of our subsidiary companies like CDC.
Well, obviously, all
part of CoreServe, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, that's right. All the property is owned by the council, but any moves to sell or rent that out from an operational viewpoint will lie within the CoreServe group.
Many thanks. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Michael.
Councillor Ephraim Gibbons, I think Councillor Barnes has got a question for you. Councillor Barnes, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My question is, I've recently received an email from an old friend of yours up near St Austell, and he put in a message that this council spent something like 1.45 million buying a plot of land that the developer only paid £100,000 for. Is that correct? And that there were some legal issues with this land?
I don't know the detail you're talking about, Councillor Barnes, because it may be commercial. If you can let me have the details, I'm happy to follow it up. In terms of your note in the sidebar, responsibility for Langgarth, strictly speaking, that falls within the economic development portfolio of Councillor Dwelly. I did recently respond to a question at full council from Councillor Harris on Langgarth, mainly because the chairman directed it to me. But strictly speaking, Langgarth is the responsibility of Councillor Dwelly.
So if I forward the email that I received from your friend, you would reply to me?
Yes.
Right, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Corcoran, please.
Hello, sorry, I feel like I've come into this meeting and I'm just asking loads of questions. This one is 2.2 from Councillor Ephraim Gibbons' report. It's about the leisure centres. My heart kind of sunk a bit because we are obviously reviewing the leisure centres since the pretty much collapse of GLL. It says terms of reference are being finalised for the strategic review of leisure centres in Cornwall and the use of an external consultant. And my questions were really about that, about the review and the external consultant. Do we know who it is yet? Do we know what is the budget figure for it? Do we know how we're procuring them and where they're coming from, whether they'll be local, and why do we need one?
Well, clearly the strategic review, the terms of reference are being finalised at the moment. It is thought that it would probably be useful to use somebody externally. They have been advising already in terms of what goes on with the leisure centres. I won't mention a name at the moment because I don't think it's been finally agreed that they will be providing the advice.
Not the budget, no. Because obviously we've spent a lot of money on GLL already.
Yes, quite clearly, and obviously the future of GLL is uncertain because of their difficulties, and there'll be no surprise there. But there are the opportunities for the leisure service provision perhaps to be looked at not just through GLL but wider afield with other providers in Cornwall. So I think it makes sense to do this work. I don't think yet they've established the cost of that. I see Councillor Painter's got his hands up. He may be able to provide a bit more information.
I'm just going to ask quickly before Councillor Painter comes in then. The money that we've committed to GLL so far, if anything happens, if they lose the contract, is there any provision for clawback of some of that money?
I think it's early stage at the moment to consider what might happen, but clearly it needs to be worked on at the moment, and I'm sure our officers will be giving some thought to that over the coming month or so.
Adam, did you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Kirkham. Yeah, I think we need to be very clear that GLL is a fully functioning company and is not, about to go belly up. So we need to be a bit clear in our language that GLL have reopened all of our sites. Every single one's open, even Launceston Swimming Pool, which has only just opened over the last few days. So everything is reopened. They are operating, obviously, in a COVID-safe manner. Clearly, it's been very difficult for the company across the country, but they are working properly and are not on any sort of notice of failure. But the vast majority of the support we put in place, not just for GLL, but for our other partners across Cornwall, running other leisure centres as well, was capital money, and capital money that will be drawn down as and when is needed. So it was not an upfront cash grant. So yes, there were strings attached to the money. So we did not just dish out that money to the companies, directly. It was all linked to performance targets and targets around property and around helping them move forward, and some in the form of loans that they would then pay back. So we were careful how we did that, bearing in mind the situation around leisure, and bearing in mind we have got a review taking place now through till next year to look at our estate to make sure that we can continue to have a functioning estate across Cornwall.
Okay, thank you for that. Any more questions for Councillor Ethorne Gibbons, please? Any more questions? Okay, thank you for that. So, Councillor Harris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just a small question for Councillor Ethorne Gibbons. In the previous debate, he said he hadn't seen this estate transformation update paper before it was printed. And I just wanted to ask really, what is the role of a cabinet member if he doesn't read papers before they're published?
It should have come to me earlier than it did. It's as simple as that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, if there are no more questions, moving on to item 10, any other business that the chairman considers to be of urgency? I have none. So I think that concludes today's proceedings. I would like to thank everyone for their contribution. It's been a long day, but I think we've done some good work, and I think this is the meeting where I wish you all a happy Christmas and a prosperous new year, and a better one than 2020 for many of us, I'm sure. So have a good festive season. I look forward to seeing you all at our January meeting.
Thank you, Chairman. Same to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Cheers.
Bye.
Hope to see you in Padstow.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay.